And now the latest across the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for August the 22nd. Well, today on day 233 of 2021, we have 4 systems active across the wide world of tropics today. That being Tropical Storm Linda back from the dead just northeast of Hawaii, Grace now a remnant after its major hurricane landfall in Mexico, Hurricane Henri approaching the northeastern US, expected to make landfall tomorrow, and Tropical Storm Omais in the western Pacific approaching the southern Japanese islands. We have several areas of interest as well across the wide world of tropics tonight. So far, 55 storms have formed, and that's likely to rise over the next few days. Starting out in the Atlantic Basin on day 83 of hurricane season, you can see Grace is going off the screen there in Mexico. Henri is east of Maryland, heading north towards the New England coastlines. That's likely to be a historic storm, regardless if it's a tropical storm or hurricane when it makes landfall. And a tropical wave way out in the main development region has a 20% chance of forming as it generally heads into that formation area that you can see in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean there. In the Eastern Pacific on day 99 of hurricane season, you can see Linda out there northeast of Hawaii. I don't believe that's expected to make significant impacts. I think it'll be not a tropical storm by the time it gets to Hawaii, but tropical storm again by our analysis. Grace is a remnant again over Mexico. You can see it there. High chance, 80% chance of that reforming in the Eastern Pacific. If it were to reform, it would not remain Grace. It would get the next name in the Eastern Pacific. And an AOI to the south of Grace's formation area, you can see there 60% chance of formation on that over the next 5 days for tropical cyclone formation. Well, the Eastern Pacific may be getting a bit more active. And in the Western Pacific, the only thing active here is Tropical Storm Omais, which is heading in the general direction of Taiwan and the southern Japanese islands. This is expected to track east of China and may bring some impacts to South Korea over the next few days. And that's all of the systems that we have across the world tonight. No storms active in the North Indian Ocean, and no storms active in the South Indian Ocean, although we are working on our Southern Hemisphere animations, and they hopefully will be out fairly soon. Moving on to the satellite imagery across the Atlantic Basin, this time you can see Grace is really not looking as good as it did when it made landfall last night, so as you'd expect, the topography in Mexico, it's bringing devastating impacts there. It's already brought devastating impacts, heavy rainfall. It also brought significant storm surge and rainfall. You can see Henri there, you can see it's looking pretty good right now, and we've got recon in the plane right now. From what I've seen, the data I think may support it being a hurricane still, but it's nearing that little cutoff between the Gulf Stream and cooler sea surface temperatures, and you can see that tropical wave in the main development region, not expected to form within the next 2 days. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see a little Linda there, northeast of Hawaii. It's been blowing off some convection today, to our surprise, that is. And I'm actually honestly surprised it's back. And what an amazing storm Linda has been. It's still going strong as a tropical storm. And Linda, of course, that will be moving into the Eastern Pacific off Mexico. And there's some disturbed thunderstorm activity associated with that next AOI that could have a system form off the coast of Mexico. In the Western Pacific, the general thunderstorm activity is widespread here, but the main focus is there east of Taiwan, Tropical Storm Omais there. It's looking pretty good. It's got fairly good convection and fairly good circulation, and this is not expected to become a typhoon, but remain a tropical storm on its way through the southern Japanese islands and up to South Korea. In the North Indian Ocean, we have the normal monsoonal activity there over India and over the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. And in the South Indian Ocean, we have some general thunderstorm activity near the equatorial region. Other than that, if you look towards the Mariana Islands and Madagascar, it is fairly quiet in all of those areas. The sea surface temperatures across the world, you can see where Linda is, it's not actually too favorable, which is why it's actually quite to my surprise that it's managed to become a tropical storm again, but it is heading into warmer sea surface temperatures, so perhaps if environmental conditions are conducive, could it remain a tropical storm? We'll have to see how that plays out. You can see for the 2 AOIs in the Eastern Pacific, waters are piping hot. In the Atlantic Basin, or on Ray, they're going to start dropping off significantly. For that tropical wave, it's very warm for it where it's heading. North Atlantic is also very hot, ready for peak of season. You can see the Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal, and Arabian Sea remaining steady. I can remember doing my last Tropical Weather Bulletin, and they were pretty much the same story. And the Western Pacific, we're generally remaining hot throughout the entire Western Pacific, very warm ahead of Omais. The sea surface temperature anomalies, it's pretty much the same story, except a little bit of differences in the Eastern Pacific I'm noticing here. Mostly above average in the North Atlantic. We're seeing some of those above average waters by Mexico turn to near average by Mexico. In the Western Pacific, it is fairly above average. The waters are recovering from where we had those train of storms earlier in the month and into July. And the Indian Ocean, we're generally above average. Moving into the On This Day segment of our Tropical Weather Bulletin tonight. On this day, on August the 22nd, 1999, we had Major Hurricane Brett, a Category 4 hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. I think max winds were around 120 knots, and this would eventually weaken down to a 100-knot system, around 115 miles per hour. 115 miles per hour, and it would make landfall in South Texas. Hurricane Cindy would go on into the open Atlantic Ocean, become a major hurricane. Fernando was remaining weak in the Eastern Pacific. Sam was about to make landfall in China, and Tanya and Dora were both tropical storms in the open West Pacific, not impacting any land areas. Dora was actually a very long track system from the Eastern Pacific, interestingly enough. So quite an active On This Day, and an incredible one, including Brett, a Category 4 on this day. As we look towards the naming list tonight, in the Atlantic Basin, we're looking out for Ida and Julian. Could we see Ida soon? Fairly possible if that AOI decides to form. In the Eastern Pacific, the next two names are Marty and Nora, and we're likely to see those two within the next few days. In the Central Pacific, I'm done saying Hone, I'm looking out for Iona, as the next two names are Hone and Iona here in the Central Pacific. As we look towards the Western Pacific, after newly named Omais, the next name is Kansan. In the North Indian Ocean, the next name is Gulab, although we're not likely to see that anytime soon. And as we move to the Southern Hemisphere, in the Australian region, the next name is Patty, followed by Ruby. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, the next name is Anna. And in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Cody. We'll have another Tropical Weather Bulletin, I'd assume live, tomorrow night.